Welcome to Stoughton Spotlight. I'm your host, Jeffrey Pickette. We're continuing our Conversations with the Candidates series, where I'll be sitting down with the residents who are running for contested races in the upcoming April town election. On this episode, I'm joined by one of the candidates for the Board of Selectmen. There are 2 seats up in this April's town election on the Board of Selectmen, and there are 6 candidates running for those 2 seats. So on this episode, I'm joined by Michael Sullivan. Michael, thank you for joining me.
Jeff, thanks so much for having me today. I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of everything that you and SMAC produce, so it's really a big pleasure being here, so thank you.
Thank you, we appreciate that. And I'd like to give you the opportunity, where you're new to the political scene, to introduce yourself to the voters, tell us a little bit about yourself, and why you decided that it was the right time to get into the selectman's race.
Sure, so there's really 3 big reasons why I've launched my campaign. The first reason is I feel that the current board just isn't getting the job done. I feel like as a citizen, as a voter of the town, we deserve and we really need better leadership at this point in time. To me, true leadership is sort of talking less and listening more, respecting the opinions of other people, and really just displaying a professional attitude that you can bring to the select board. The second reason, as I'm sure you know and many of our voters know, there are many capital improvement projects planned in the coming years for Stoughton. We all know about the high school, we all know about the renovation to the library, but there could be a need down the line for a replacement South Elementary School, and there's been talk about the need for a combined police and fire safety complex. I want to use my experience as a licensed civil engineer with experience in structural analysis, design, construction management, and project delivery, just to sort of help the town out with some of these projects and make sure that we receive the best bang for our buck. We've seen what happens in this town when we don't have the right professionals working for our best interests. And I think it's important to have my experience in the coming years. And then finally, the third reason, and this is sort of the most important for me, is I was born in Stoughton, raised in Stoughton, product of the Stoughton public school systems, and now, along with my wife, we've chosen Stoughton as the community where we're raising our family, sort of the next generation of Sullivans. And so I want to make sure that my kids grow up in a safe community and that they're afforded all of the best educational opportunities. So those are really the 3 big reasons why I've decided to launch my campaign.
Sure. And observing the current Board of Selectmen, what are some takeaways that you have? What do you feel that you could do differently, add to that board? Because 3 of the members will be the same no matter what at the end of the election. So what do you feel you could add to the board?
Well, I definitely feel that over the past year or so, there's been a lack of professionalism and decorum on that board. And, I just want to say from the beginning, while I don't really agree with many of the decisions from some of the board's leadership over the past year, I really do respect the fact that, it's a volunteer position. They love this town as much as I do, and they're sort of, they're looking out for what they think are the best interests of the community. And I disagree with many of their decisions, but I really do respect them for the amount of the time that they put into the job, the amount of preparation that they do for that job. In terms of actually what I can provide to the board, I think that the board needs to have a certain level of decorum. We all know that the select board is the highest executive authority in this community, and it's important that they display a professional attitude and that they don't talk down to other board members, that they don't talk down to residents or other municipal employees. So I think it's important that there's just a return of a level of professionalism to the board, and that's something that I want to work on, if elected.
Oh, certainly something that's made headlines over the last year plus has been the board's relationship with the town manager, and it's been well established that the town manager's contract has not been or they made the decision not to renew it, and it expires. And so if elected, one of your first tasks would be to deal with the town manager situation. First of all, what do you feel, how do you feel about the current town manager? Would you be, if he was willing, would you be interested in possibly extending his contract? Or if not, how do you feel about like a search process? What would your philosophy be there, or your practice there?
Well, I'm on board with obviously going through with the search process. I think it's important to allow Mr. Hartman to reapply for his position if that's something that he's interested in. For me, I think that the most important thing that we need to do for the upcoming search process is make sure that we are hiring somebody with experience in Massachusetts. Whoever we bring in to be the next town manager, even if it is Mike, they need to have a thorough understanding of Massachusetts Commonwealth laws, and they need to understand, how things are done here in Massachusetts. I'm really not in favor of opening it up to, a national search or something like that, and I am in favor of bringing in other candidates. The whole controversy sort of with the town manager over the past year and a half, it's really sort of, in my opinion, halted a lot of progress that we've made in this community. And it's really unfortunate. And I sort of understand where both sides are coming from, with this issue. And I do want to give him an opportunity to reapply. And if he is selected, I would certainly welcome the opportunity to work with him. He has done, while he has garnered a lot of, bad press and a lot of people speaking out against him, he has done some pretty darn good things for this town over the past couple of years. He's worked with the school building committee, for the potential high school project. He helped to bring in Amazon and implement the tax increment financing agreement. He's done some good things for the community. But I certainly do understand where people are coming from, where there were a lot of emotions that ran high when Chief Shostany left last year, when our fire chief left, and when the DPW director had left, and they all had sort of bad things to say about Mr. Hartman. There were certainly some high emotions at the time, but I really think that the controversy over the last year, the way that the current board has sort of chosen to pick fights, with Mr. Hartman, I think it's sort of hindered progress for our town in the past year, and it's been unfortunate. But I do want to work to make sure that whoever we bring in is well qualified and really just has the best interests of our community that they're looking out for. So.
Oh, for the police chief search, that's obviously another role that the Board of Selectmen has. What did you feel about that process? It just concluded, the way the board did not have a public interview process, and that was something that again created headlines. Where did you fall on that? Were you fine with there being no public interview? Would you have preferred there to be one?
So I think that for me personally, the biggest drawback to the way that it was handled was, obviously the time. I mean, 10 months to hire the incumbent chief is just really, that's embarrassing personally, and that just shows the inability of the current board to get things done. In terms of having the interview process or not, that's really at the end of the day, that was just one small component of a 10-month-long process that sort of was just handled poorly throughout. Chief McNamara, I'm looking forward to having her as the new full-time chief. I think she's, from everybody that I talk to and from people that I know on the police force, they all have great things to say about her. And I think at the end of the day, even though the process might have been poorly performed by the select board, I think they did come to the right decision. So I mean, it's, we can sit here and we can sort of badmouth the process, but I think they did come to the right decision. I would have liked to have seen it done a little bit quicker, and just to make sure that there's no morale issues in the department, or that other officers may not be getting their own raises or promotions. So I wish it would have been done faster, and I wish they would have handled the process a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, they came to the right decision, I believe, so I'm happy with it.
And another police and public safety issue for that matter is the staffing levels. And again, much has been made about adding to the police and fire staff. So the fire department is at staffing levels from 20, 30 years ago. The police have issues around town that they just didn't face 2, 3 decades ago. But of course that comes at a cost. So where do you fall on being able to fund new positions, and where would this money come from?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a little embarrassing, the staffing levels that we have at our fire department right now, and it needs to change. In terms of funds, there's obviously a limited pot of money that we can use to operate our town, and it's really, we can't keep asking taxpayers to shoulder that burden. We already passed the debt exclusion for the high school, and we already know that property taxes are going to be going up the 2.5% without the debt exclusion. So it's really unfair to keep asking taxpayers to shoulder that. For me personally, if I'm elected to the Board of Selectmen, I think it needs to be a priority to increase economic development in this community and really work to attract new businesses, but also strengthen the ties that we have with existing businesses, so that maybe they might want to invest more in our town. So I think that needs to be the priority. Attracting more businesses to increase the commercial and industrial tax base, and hopefully lessen the burden on residential taxpayers.
How can the board play a role in that very task of attracting additional business and industry to the town?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because there's actually a couple of things that I think that the board needs to prioritize. If we take a look a couple years ago with how the process unfolded with Amazon, we saw a town manager that worked hand in hand with that current board and town meeting. In the past year, now that we have a sort of a select board that doesn't get along with the town manager, doesn't want to work with the town manager, that sort of hinders the process. And that's why it's important that the new board, works hand in hand with the town manager. Also, if we look at the town center, that is a black eye on this community, and right there is a huge opportunity for our town to really do something big, and it's going to take leadership from the select board. A select board that they're going to need to have vision for that downtown. And they need to work with the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority, the Community Preservation Committee, the Economic Development Coordinator, and the town manager to really just find out, what project we want to prioritize, whether it's, getting the old railroad station, whether it's, working with all the stakeholders to relocate the post office, and then open up some of those areas for development, whether it's new businesses, commercial, or whether it's a transit-oriented development to bring in new residents. That's how we're going to increase our tax base, and it's certainly not going to be this economic hub that town centers used to be. But if it can turn into even just a little bit of a destination, maybe a little bit more open space, maybe some more restaurants, who knows, maybe even a theater, those are the types of things that attract people to want to live in a community. And it's important that, Stoughton starts working on that.
So you mentioned all of the players that would be involved in a process like this. How do you bring them all together? Because it's not the first time that's been discussed and that idea has come up, but a lot of times it seems to stop at the point where it comes to bringing everybody together and following through. So how do you go about with the follow through?
Yeah, absolutely. So it takes two things. It takes leadership, but it also takes vision, and it involves working with those various boards and bringing them all to the table. Right now in Stoughton, maybe over the past couple of years, we obviously had the master plan, which was great, but now that that's gone and passed, implementing it is a whole other question. And it's important that the select board really takes the lead getting all of those entities on the same page. Me personally, if elected, I really think that it's important to bring the Redevelopment Authority, Community Preservation, the Planning Board, the Economic Development Coordinator, and the Town Manager and the Select Board. Those entities, they need to come together and they really need to decide on what type of project they want to advance for the downtown, whether it's working to create, a big open lawn, like which was one of the suggestions in our master plan from a few years ago, or whether it's working on little pocket parks and maybe putting in like a little strip mall where the post office is now. That's where it really just takes leadership and vision from the select board, and they can't. Right now, I just see the current Board of Selectmen sort of just kind of wavering on it. They're sort of waiting for other people to step up, and they're reacting to things. And that's not what we need right now. We need a select board that's going to step right out front and lead.
So if you look at the candidates running, there's a group with political experience, either on the Board of Selectmen or other groups, boards in town, and then there's a group that's new to the political process. What would you say to residents about experience and its relevancy in being able to serve on the board?
Absolutely. I think experience is extremely important. If I take a look at some of the other candidates, people like Rick Hill, I think he would make a fantastic member to the select board. I think it's really important that we start attracting sort of new faces to the political scene here in town. If you look at all of the various boards and committees and town meeting, we sort of have the same 100 to 200 people that are active and maybe have been active for the past decade or decade plus for many of them. It's important that we start getting some younger faces, onto these boards and committees that bring, a fresh perspective to some of the issues facing town, and really just, have the opportunities to maybe steer Stoughton in the direction that they want, that they want the town to go in. I think it's wonderful, personally, that a lot of young people are getting active in the political scene here.
Sure, and just in your race alone, there, two candidates, one who's 25 and you're 31, so.
Exactly. I was a little dismayed that I wasn't the youngest candidate, but I've talked to John a few times, and he's a good young candidate, and he has some pretty good ideas as well. So.
Just talk about that overall, the fact that in a lot of years you see maybe one extra, there's 2 seats open, you'll see 3 candidates or 4 candidates at the most. I mean, this year to see 6 candidates, what do you think led to this influx of candidates into the race?
I think it's definitely at least for the select board race, it's not hard to look at the way that the meetings have been run over the past year, some of the decisions that have been made, and really just see that, that's why so many new faces are coming out. I'll talk for myself. I'm not happy, with some of the decisions made, and I haven't been happy with some of the leadership that's been representing our community for the past year. And that's really why I jumped in, and I don't want to talk for other people, but that's probably why they jumped in as well. So.
Well, when you have so many people vying for just 2 seats, what do you have to do to stand out in the crowd and distinguish yourself in a very crowded field?
That's a good question. There's some good candidates that I'm running against. It's a good thing for voters in town because they have so many options. So it's really important for all of us just to sort of show voters why we might be the best possible option for them. I think for me, while I don't have the experience of serving as a selectman, or I don't have 2 decades of experience as a town meeting representative, I think I bring some pretty good experience to the board. I'm a registered engineer. I have a master's degree in business administration. Just the past 2 years, I've actually had an opportunity to work at the State House as a legislative fellow for the Boston Society of Civil Engineers. And basically what happened is I was a direct aide to the Joint Committee on Transportation at the State House. So over the past couple of years, I've been able to get some good experience working with some of our state's legislators and senators, and that's, I think, some of the experience that I believe is important for our town now, especially if we want to do something, good for the downtown area, which is going to need state and possibly even federal help for. So.
Sure, and where you mentioned transportation, this project seems to come up and never go away, and that's of course the South Coast Rail, and the route changes and it goes back and forth, Middleborough, Stoughton, Middleborough. Just overall though, what's your take on transportation in the town and the need for either expanding the rail or improving what we have but not expanding? What would your take on that?
Sure, well, I'm as a civil engineer, I shouldn't come out and say that I'm against South Coast Rail, but I really am. And for a few reasons. It's projected to cost, I think, over $3.5 billion now, and that's, for projections for a decade out. So that could still go up even more. As a taxpayer, I don't see the benefit of spending $3.5 billion where you're only going to be seeing maybe 5,000 riders a day. Now for Stoughton, if you look at Stoughton, how it's impacted from South Coast Rail, they're talking about electrifying the entire corridor, which means you're going to have overhead electric gantries with towers spaced every couple hundred feet or whatnot, and it's going to divide the town. And I just think it's just a terribly conceived project that I think needs to be scrapped. So recently, MassDOT has proposed the alternate Middleborough route, which is, I think, only estimated to cost maybe $300 or $400 million. And it would avoid using the Stoughton extension. And I think, I'm hoping that that's the route that the state and the Baker administration want to do, just because it'll sort of lessen the burden on Stoughton. Whatever happens, though, we need to find out from the state soon, because if we are serious about doing something, big with our downtown, we need to find out what direction the state is going to do, with the train station that's there now. Because it really is sort of taking up a lot of land right in the downtown, and either way, we need to get good direction from our state government.
Now, as we start to wind down, about 5 minutes left, what are some of your other visions for the town? You discussed, downtown, obviously. You discussed some of the building projects that may be coming down the line. What other types of projects or initiatives would you like to tackle over the next 3 years if elected?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I think that the board needs to prioritize is public safety. And that's not just with staffing at the police and fire department, but for me, that also includes prioritizing sidewalk infrastructure and crosswalks around town. We have a lot of young school-aged kids that are walking to school, from families that might not be able to afford busing right now. It's important that we avoid as many, potential incidents in the future, because, we've seen what happens in this town. People drive crazy, and sometimes there's not safe sidewalks and safe crosswalks. So I really want to prioritize that if I get elected to the board.
Overall, with the board, of course, one of its other functions is just dealing with residents, dealing with other town department heads. How important is that aspect of just the relationships that the board has to maintain with helping with constituency issues, dealing with department heads? Do you feel the board should be having direct contact with department heads? Just your philosophy on some of those issues.
So I think direct contact is a good thing, if elected, that's something that I'd like to have, but at the same time, they can't be walking on the town manager's, feet. At the end of the day, it's the town manager that's really running this town, but that's not to say that we shouldn't be able to communicate with department heads and maybe voice some of the things that we're hearing from residents. I think that's important as a selectman, and that's something that I'd be happy to do if elected.
Are there any ideas you have for the way the meetings are run itself that you would like to see, kind of more of the nitty-gritty things, the way, either the agenda or the frequency of meetings that ideas that you might have to change what's going on right now?
Sure. Well, I'd love to see a lot less shouting at some of these meetings. That's one of the first ones. And it seems like these meetings have been running very long, and they've been having a lot of them. And maybe there's room there to sort of become a little bit more efficient and maybe run them a little bit, smoother. And that really that comes down to the individual selectmen being prepared for the meetings and making sure that they've read all of the literature that they've been provided. But for the most part, I think the format works pretty well. I really enjoy the citizens' comments portion of the meetings because it provides a forum for residents to voice any issues that they might have, and I think that's a good thing for voters and something that I would like to have continued.
Now, how important is it to be able to do the homework? It seems like running for selectman or serving as a selectman, it's not just every other Tuesday. It really can be looked at as a full-time job.
Yeah, a second full-time job on top of what other people are working.
Right.
Preparation is important, and from what I can tell, there's a lot of reading involved. There's a lot of meeting with voters, with residents, meeting with businesses, and honestly, I shouldn't be this excited about performing the job, but I really am looking forward to it if elected. I'm a lifelong Stoughton resident, and I love this town so much, and I think I have a lot to offer, if I'm elected to the board.
Great. Well, with the final minute, it's just a chance to kind of make a pitch to voters and as to why you should be one of their two choices come April.
Sure. Well, I already touched a little bit on some of my experience as a civil engineer and, my master's degree in business administration and my legislative fellowship. But, I also, if you ask anybody that knows me, I've always sort of had the ability to respect other people's opinions and work well with other people. Who knows, maybe that's a little bit of my training as a civil engineer where we have to work with so many different disciplines and stakeholders, but I just think that that's really important for our new Board of Selectmen come April. We need to have a better level of professionalism and decorum on the board, and we need to respect each other. And I think that it's something that I want to see on the board, and that's really one of the big reasons why I'm running for one of those two seats.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for tuning in. This has been Stoughton Spotlight, Conversations with the Candidates. I want to thank Michael Hammond for directing this episode, and I want to remind everybody watching at home that the town election is in April, and make sure you vote. There are plenty of contested races, including the Selectmen's race, where 6 candidates are vying for 2 seats. So once again, I'm Jeffrey Pickette. Thank you so much for tuning in.